Hello and welcome back to the Meaning Academy podcast. Dr. Daniel A. Franz, Dr. Rabbi Baruch Halevi, Rabbi B, and Dr. D with you again, talking about all things logotherapy, existential analysis, and Dr. Viktor Frankl. Today, bringing in some current events. You know, sometimes we philosophize and hypothesize about theories and ideas, but today we thought bringing in some current events would be a good idea. B, you want to introduce the current events we're talking about? I think you in our pre-meeting had some good ideas on that.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about the Titan. It's not a submarine. What's it technically called? I don't know. We'll call it a submarine, but it's the tragedy that everybody knows about by now, where how many people were on it?
I believe it was five. Yeah.
Five individuals met their death, came to their death in tragic situation. And I don't know enough of the details to really get into it. That's not the nature of this conversation. But the reaction, not by all, but certainly by enough, that felt very un-logo philosophy, meaning centered in spirit. And we were going to talk about that, as well as I think some of the beautiful, noble, courageous aspects of these five individuals who went exploring down to the depths of the ocean.
Well, B, I don't know much about the details of it other than, as you said, it was a human tragedy. You can't help but hear about these things or see them just when you're hopping on your search page or something like that. The thing as you mentioned, the thing I saw the most of, other than here's what happened, here's maybe why it happened, but people's reaction was so visceral, so nasty, so ugly. And maybe that's just an interesting point. Maybe that's just what the algorithm showed me or what the internet was full of and putting out there. But I can't help but think like it was just downright ugly.
Yeah, we have to be mindful of, like you said, what we're seeing is what sells. So of course, we're not going to say that everybody, the majority, was celebrating. However, the fact that anybody was celebrating is just shocking at a human level. It's no different than 9/11, and there were picture of some Palestinians or somebody in the Middle East who were celebrating
Mhm.
joyfully. I lived in Israel, and there were times when wars happen, when missiles are launched. I never once met an Israeli who was celebrating at the demise of another human being, even if they were enemies. It's a necessary part of life in that situation. Tragedies happen. I don't think there's any or ever a time for celebrating somebody's tragedy. And that's, I think, what's so shocking is there were enough people that gave us pause to do this podcast.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the fact that it happened, to your point, even enemy combatants. I read and study a lot of World War II history, and even going back to one of the bloodiest conflicts in human history, um, combatants still respected each other and didn't seek their cruel demise of their opponent, but it was war. But here
Um,
we go ahead.
so go ahead, finish.
Well, I mean, here we have the situation where, again, what we saw on social media was people celebrating the horrible demise of five individuals because of who they were or who they were portrayed to be, right? So, I mean, the word that comes out is these were billionaires. Of course, they had money, they had funds, they had resources. This was a $250,000 per person trip, right? So these were resourceful individuals that had access to money.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much the gist of why I heard them from those again. I mean, I know there were some not just like trolls, but I even read a couple stories about some journalists who did articles on this or podcasts on how these guys, I think they were all men, I don't know, got what they deserved because they're billionaire playboys, they're arrogant, they were just looking for good time when first of all, I mean, lots to pick apart here.
So much.
We're starting with never celebrating human destruction. I'm reminded of the Torah, the Bible, when Israelites crossed, the famous scenario, they crossed the Sea of Reeds, the Red Sea. They're on the other side. They're celebrating. I don't know if it's in the text. I'd have to look, but there's certainly a story, a midrash we call it, where God came down and chastised the Israelites, saying, "How dare you celebrate while my children are drowning in the sea?"
Mhm.
And that's always been really deeply touching to me, because the Egyptians were doing bad things to the Israelites. The Israelites had to escape. Even there are times when we have to bring, um, destruction to human beings to put an end to it. However, celebration is never justified. So if that's true against enemy combatants, it's certainly true against human civilians.
Absolutely. And I don't know, when we are when we celebrate somebody's demise because they were wealthy, I mean, what kind of reflection is that on you, right? I mean, that just smacks of jealousy and contempt. And why, right? As you and I've talked about, um, three paths to meaning: experiential values, creative values, attitudinal values. If you can experience things in life that other people may not have access to, why wouldn't you? A, it's meaningful, but it also advances so many things, as we talked about. The exploration of the new world several hundred years ago. Well, how did people get these giant ships to go sail the seas and explore and map the world? Right? You don't do that because you're living in your parents' basement playing video games.
Yeah, those are the equivalent of the billionaires of their time. And
Hmm.
it's always a combination. Look, not just the New World, which is a huge one, but every exploratory mission, whether it's to um, the moon, whether it's new, the Wright brothers inventing flight. I mean, every single contribution or advancement, a leading edge, is composed of both finances and those willing to pioneer the new direction. And so to say that these guys were just a bunch of playboys having fun is unfair, because I just read an article that said only 150 people in human history have been down to the depths of the ocean. Think about, in this world, it's so saturated above ground. We've been everywhere. There's not a place you can stand that's you can say 150 people haven't been to. So there's something that we've just missed on the exploratory, well, as you said, the experiential side of life
Hmm.
here.
Right. B, why do we have electric cars? Why are we looking to send civilians into outer space? Because this billionaire Elon Musk said, "Hey, I want to do this, and I want to help other people to do it." And in the beginning, it costs money. Why do we have cars? Some wealthy billionaire decided, 100 years ago, to start mass producing cars. How are you and I talking, B? Because a couple guys started building computers in their garages, and now they're ubiquitous in our culture and society, and we get to do these amazing things on them. Are they terrible human beings for doing? No,
Wait,
they
wait, wait, wait. Are
explore.
you on a Mac computer? I thought you were opposed to it.
Yeah, I am not on an iDevice, B, and we should save that for another podcast. The ongoing war about our iDevices.
So you're absolutely right. And I just don't think most people have even stopped to pause to think about what these people were doing, what they could stand for. But back to the point of why rush to judgment?
Mhm.
Even look, even if they were just on a pleasure cruise and it sank and they died, that's not the point. The point is there is no they. There's no other. I mean, when you hear about them being talked about by those who are celebrating, it's a they, it's a them, it's a pronoun, it's an other, it's not a human being.
Yeah.
And that's reductionistic, and that's at the heart of the destruction of humanity, and that's what logotherapy stands guard against.
Yeah. Well, and let's look at one of the core values of logotherapy, right from Dr. Frankl. He did not believe in the collective. He fought against the collective guilt of the Nazis. He said you cannot judge one human being based on the behavior of their group.
And he pointed out in there that there were some good Nazis who risked their lives, who not enough, not too many, but if there's one, then there's no more they. He talks about one of the Nazis who gave him and other prisoners medicine out of his own, funds. And so there's no more they. The moment you have an exception to the rule, there's no more rule. And he said there were very bad Jewish prisoners who became capos who did horrific things to their own people. So there's no more they, the good guys, and they, the bad guys. Now, I'm not willing to say, that means the Nazis were good and the victims of whoever they were bad. But it does mean we must stand guard against collective anything.
Yeah, and I think something you said earlier really reflects on a lot of our teachings is the idea of pause, right? Between stimulus and response is our human ability to pause and reflect before we react. That's what separates us from the animals, right? That we have this higher cognitive functioning that when we allow ourselves to pause and to reflect and to react humanely and meaningfully, well, then we're better for it. But as you said, sometimes there are, as you called them, trolls, which I really like that word, trolls on the internet who just react, just start typing, just the visceral nature of what comes out of their mouths. Yeah, down with the billionaires, hell with them, and all these kinds of things. Like, it's inhumane.
Let's bring it down to a personal level, because a lot of people say, hey, they're not billionaires. They're not going to, they didn't laugh, all of that. But don't you have clients that speak? We all do. We're human beings. But don't you have clients who speak in terms of they? They don't like me. They fired me. They, whatever. And I think that we can do this on a very personal, real level in our daily lives too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just brought up this situation yesterday in a session of a couple working on reunification after some difficult times, right? So some separation and something very practical in a marriage situation or an intimate relationship. Every intimate relationship, every marriage struggles. We have arguments, we have disagreements. And when we do, we have to be careful who we confide in, who the they is, because as we grow in our relationship and marriage and work towards reunification or healthier situations, those people don't always grow with us. And sometimes we'll allow for those judgments when things are worked out. And one of the statements yesterday was, well, these people may still have a negative reflection on our relationship or one of the individuals in the relationship. And the common agreement was then they may not be people you need in your life, right? The theys that reflect the trolls in our lives, those that constantly bring out the negative or judge, assume, don't pause, but just react in a negative way. Sometimes we can choose to help them and see something more positive. Other times, in an individual manner, man, we just need to set boundaries for them to be out of our lives.
It's so important to really dig in as we are to the fact that nobody is anything, right? Nobody's a one thing. We are complex dynamics human beings. We're nous, as Dr. Frankl called it. We are essence. We're spirit. We're more than the sum of our parts. And when you start this is one of the challenges I'm having in this day and age with all kind of identity politics. We're more than all of these titles and descriptions, as important as they are: sexuality, gender, color, political orientation, religion. I have all these things. You have all these.
TMB, you just got us canceled in 5 different directions.
Nope.
Come on, man.
We're taking this on, but that's the point, because what we're doing is we're continuously reducing the human experience down to all these buckets, all these labels, all these titles, and we're losing the human spirit. We're losing the human encounter. Again, all of those have their place in time, as long as we remember that none of those are who we are. All of those are pieces describing how we experience life.
I will never forget the first time I came into contact with Dr. Frankl's statements on reductionism, that psychoanalysis and Adler's psychology of power and authority sought to reduce human beings down to drives and instincts, right? And in the nature of trying to understand us better. But the idea today that we continue to reduce people down to a label. You are one word. And as you and I talk, B, you are one number on your Enneagram. You are 4 letters on the MBTI. No, you're not. You are the sum of your spirit, your body, your soma, your psyche, all of these things, which, as we teach in logotherapy, makes you a unique and singular individual capable of carrying out your tasks in lives. But too often, these politics that are going to get us canceled as we continue to challenge them, these politics of reductionism to a 1-word or 2-word label will only, I don't even know how to say it. It can be catastrophic.
It's a pathway to hell. I mean,
Mhm.
the only way you could have had the Holocaust is if people were turned into, reduced to numbers. Viktor Frankl was not Viktor Frankl. He was prisoner 119104. You can't murder 6 million names, 6 million identities, 6 million human beings. You can murder, you can put into the gas chamber 6 million numbers because they're numbers.
Mhm.
This is what was done to blacks. This is what has been done to gypsies. This is what has been done to, it's they. They are no longer names, identities. They're just these labels. That's why it's so dangerous to reduce another human being. I don't care what the label is, to just that.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've really hit on the nature of why what we saw happening in social media was just so wrong. So, what should people be doing about it? I mean, should you get on the internet and start firing back answers to the trolls? You're being non logo philosoph therapeutic. But no, how do you live out a healthier message in day to day life? Well, first of all, when you see human tragedy, for goodness sake, pause and reflect. And if you're a prayerful or meditational human being, pray for the souls of these poor individuals, right? Pray for their families. At least wish well.
Yeah, I know some people get a little uncomfortable when they say, like, there's tragedy and said we're sending our love and our prayers to the victims of Columbine or whatever the shooting or whatever the thing was. But it's a beautiful gesture because it's the space between stimulus and response, right? It's that space. I'm going to just at least take a moment and just think, right? Just direct my attention, just pause. I do this. I try to do this when we live near an ambulance, and constantly coming and going. I try, when it's not annoying me and I'm, can catch my breath and be responsive. I try just to take a moment and think, Godspeed. Like, I don't know
Hmm.
who's on the end, the recipient, but I
Hmm.
hope that they get there in time. And I feel like that is more about me keeping my humanity than anything else.
Well, it is, but I mean, yes, and that's important. Keeping our own humanity, taking a moment to reflect and wish those who may be struggling or suffering well, uh, yeah, can be pretty selfish because it does good for us, for our soul, for our spirit. But there are theories out there currently being researched in science that those thoughts and well, we can reflect on thoughts and prayers in a second, but those thoughts, those prayers, those positive gestures in some way reverberate in the world and do have an impact. It's called the Institute for Noetic Science, I believe, founded by astronaut Edgar Mitchell, that does a lot of this research. But there's something to it. We know we're all interconnected and we don't always know how. So sometimes sending out positive vibes to people really is a thing.
Absolutely. We'll have a whole podcast dedicated to that topic because I think it's worthy.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking though, I'd like to make things. You asked how we effectuate change in our lives. You can't fix the world in some global macro way. It's Miss America wanting world peace. It's meaningless. What can I do? And I just had a conversation with my daughter who's going to a volleyball camp, and she went there last year, and she said to me, I don't like going there because they're mean. And I said,
Mm.
is that true? Like, who's this they? When I was a rabbi, I would get people who would like to critique me, or they call it critique, I'd call it criticize. But I would always know when we're in the red zone here, we're in a dangerous territory, when they would say, look, Rabbi, this isn't my opinion, but they are saying, you should know, they are saying, right? And whenever they said that, my response was, I am happy to engage, and I just need to know who they are. Well,
Mhm.
I can't tell you that. Well, then I can't have this conversation because they don't exist. There's
Right.
just names. There's people. And my daughter, there's no they. There's 100 girls. They're all different. You got to get past the they and find out who she is.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting. I hear that often, but again, this week, and I wish I can remember the exact situation, but the idea that, well, I disagree with you, but more importantly, all of these other people, all of they that I've talked to disagree with you well. And it's like, okay, that is, I just often call that a real cheap argument tactic, right? It's dirty fighting. Come on. Oh, well, I don't like what you had to say, but they're even more angry with you. Stop it.
Yeah, but that's when it gets really good when you can get rid of they and say, "Okay, I just need to know who they are."
Yes,
I've
absolutely.
never, I've never met one person who's ever said, "Well, what they'll say is I can't tell you." Well, then I can't have this conversation because they don't
Absolutely.
exist.
There's no need to. So, right, judging people and using that kind of ammunition of the unknown they is just unfair.
So that's one strategy. Another one, excuse me, for me is that back to what you were talking about, Dan, collective guilt, collective anything. When I find myself, and we're human beings, we all do this. They in our mind, and we start pinning all of this on them. So here's a perfect example. I met a guy who had all kinds of neo-Nazi stuff on his body, and he wanted to get into it with me. And my first reaction was, I don't engage with them, right?
Mm.
And then I changed my mind based on this Frankl idea, because until he proves himself to be a neo-Nazi, and what he said to me was he just wanted to talk to a Jewish person and apologize. And he had like coming to Jesus. His tears were in his eyes, and he said, "I've just been waiting for a Jew." I mean, it kind of already, tells you where he's coming from. I'm waiting for a Jew, and I found you. But I was happy to represent that, and he confessed. Like he just spent the next hour confessing to this rabbi, and I would have missed that opportunity if I would have written him off as a they.
Yeah, that's beautiful. When we treat people as individuals, as spirits, as nous, as a unique and special human being, we often can get to see what's really behind all of that hard exterior, what's behind all of those tattoos, all of that neo-Nazi branding. And it's hard sometimes, right? Because it is human nature to seek understanding. We seek understanding through putting people into groups, right? That's our a way of quickly trying to understand somebody. But then again, we have that opportunity between stimulus and response is the opportunity to pause and reflect and think. I don't know a darn thing about that person just because they're part of that group, just because they carry that flag, just because they wear those clothes. I don't know anything about them, but we seek to understand through that judgment sometimes, and oftentimes we get it wrong.
And let's make it really real, because people can say, well, I don't do that. Really? Because this world we live in right now is more divided over politics. And as we move into the next election cycle, let's
Mhm.
learn from the past one. I heard multiple times somebody who's a Republican must be, responsible for everything that Donald Trump or whomever, their villain of choices in the Republican Party stands for. There's they, or on the other side, all liberals are this, and we are in dangerous territory when we start doing this to half the country, to our neighbors, to our family members. So as we head into this next election cycle, let's learn from our mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. Just because, again, going back to just because somebody is, you think they're in a category, in a group, doesn't always mean you truly understand and know them. And you have to pay attention to the uniqueness, to the individuality.
Any other ways to defy this human
Hmm.
inclination to reduce other human beings?
From a lot of things that I've read, sometimes the best way to do that is to have conversations with people, whether it's just sitting with somebody on an airplane or, waiting in line somewhere. When you seek to judge, maybe it's having a conversation, or maybe it's reflecting and pulling that judgment back and trying to do just something kind for that individual you think is in a group that you may not be tolerant of. There's the other word, be intolerant.
It's true. There's there's a teaching in the Talmud that talks about um, the mother of Sisera, and Sisera was the Hitler of their time and
Hmm.
did horrible things, but she was crying after her son was killed, and there was sort of a debate or discussion around, like how could she cry for him? He's an evil person, but that person had a mother, and that was the mother, and a mother remembers her son as a baby, and that villain was a baby at one point. And I feel like if we can do that, and by the way, the shofar blast, the ram's horn,
Hmm.
is based on the cry of Sisera's mother, because on the high holidays we're supposed to open our hearts. So when we hear that sound, we're supposed to hear the sound of our enemy's mother crying for what happened to her baby. There's just this humanity in it that I think about when I think about the evil people that do bad things. A Bernie Madoff had a mother, and fill in your villain du jour had a mother. Can we see the person holistically
Hmm.
and remember they're a child of God?
Hmm. Yeah, if we continue to look at different, biblical statements or other ancient wisdom texts, right? The idea of pray for your enemies is pretty prominent through there, right? That um, sometimes it makes them not an enemy, sometimes it helps, but to seek the good of others is something we can do every day, whether they're billionaires or your neighbor next door or whomever it may be. To seek the common good is a message that we can all buy into for whatever reason, and somehow raise the consciousness of those around us, our families, our communities. That's how you change the world.
So, I can hear some people's the hair on I can see the hair on the back of their neck standing up, especially the Jewish audience, because some people got upset with Frankel. Some people get upset with pray for your enemies or forgive your enemies. And I'll draw a distinction between praying for your enemies as because we are supposed to pray for enemies to change their heart, to turn back, not to exonerate. It's not the same thing.
Hmm.
I say all the time, forgive, don't forget.
Hmm.
We say, for the Holocaust, never again. We're not going to forget it. We're not going to let it repeat itself, but we can still forgive, soften our hearts, move on. We don't hold modern day Germans responsible for their parents, their grandparents, their ancestors' atrocities. That's
Hmm.
forgiving. That's not forgetting.
Hmm. And another interesting point. I believe we live in a time where we have so few true enemies in our day to day life, but yet we can sure contrive them. We can make them up. We can find ourselves angry at different people in different groups for, well, inhumane reasons, right? Why would you be angry at somebody in a submarine because they can afford to do it and you can't, right? That's almost as silly as, well, I can afford to drive a car but other people can't. They should really be angry at me because I drive a car.
Or they celebrate all the traffic deaths.
Yeah. Right, there we go. Right, when we look at others in judgment, we have no time. I believe it was Mother Teresa, when you are judging, you have no time to love, right? And so when you are constantly comparing other people and finding them to be despicable to you for whatever reason, well, you're missing out on your own humanity, not as just as much as theirs, but your own humanity too. You're only sullying, you're dirtying your own spirit. So to step back and to find time to appreciate, respect, pause, to love instead of judge will only help you be better, but in that way, help a lot of those around you be better
It's
too.
it's so true. Before we wrap up, I really have I think about reductionism, reducing
Hmm.
other people all the time, but I never thought about it from that perspective. That when I am reducing another, I'm actually reduced.
Hmm.
Right? I'm the type of person that is reducing. I'm reduced. I'm smaller than my defiant spirit in that moment. And like there is this part about, yeah, it's about me as much as it is about them. And I don't want to live a reduced existence.
Absolutely. So if we stop judging and love a little bit more, we're not reducing ourselves, we're not reducing others, and things get better. We have less trolls on the internet.
And I think that's probably a good place because the running man is wrapping up right now. Our most loyal listener who's finishing his jog, or wherever you are, whoever you are. We appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate your growing loyalty. We want to share some how to get involved with the Frankl Meaning Academy steps.
Absolutely. Hop on over to themeaningacademy.com or themeaningacademy.org. Sign up for our weekly mailer. Well, you'll get all the information you need to hop on and join us for our Meaning Mastermind, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. I don't know. I can't do that calculation. 3 p.m. Eastern every Thursday afternoon, where we talk not just podcasts, but we interact. Right? We throw around ideas and we ask for your participation, or not. You can just kind of listen into a live podcast and hang out with us. But if you have questions, topics you'd like us to cover, hop on the Meaning Mastermind, 3 p.m. Eastern every Thursday. Get there through the Meaning Academy website. This is your opportunity to kind of participate with us and to grow this thing we've been working on for a few years now, and to help it become the meaningful opportunity we hope it will be.
And to build our meaning community. We call them meaning seekers, of like-minded, like-hearted, like-spirited people who want to expand, who want to get rid of the world of reduction and just grow together with other open-hearted human beings. And that's where we invite you into our meaning seeker community.
And I would even add, B, I would challenge, even if you're not like-minded, even if you think what we have to offer here is drivel, let's talk about it. Come on over, and that's one of the things, one of the core tenets you and I agreed on with Dr. Elise and Scott. Like, we want everybody to be a part of this. If you want to challenge and have as long as we can have an intelligent conversation about it, like, we are definitely open to these ideas being challenged. Of course, we've dedicated our lives to them and are pretty well experienced in them and have some strong opinions, but they can be challenged too, and through that we can grow.
So the takeaway from that is, if you are not like-minded and you want to challenge, you'll reach out to Dr. Dan. If you're like-minded and you just want to have a good time, reach out to me. Until the next time, we are the Viktor Frankl Meaning Academy, and we know you, we wish you will go out into the world and live with meaning, purpose, and resilience.
Take care.
Take care.